When my daughter told me I wasn't welcome at her house for Thanksgiving, I forced a smile, walked back to my truck, and made one phone call. By the end of that week, I'd canceled the loan payments that kept their perfect little world afloat. And that was just the start of what I had in mind. Sometimes, you have to draw a line to remind people who you really are. You won't believe what happened next. Before I dive deeper, please hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're listening from. It means the world to hear from you. Now, let me take you back to that chilly November afternoon in Rochester, New York. I was sitting on Sophia's plush velvet sofa, the one I'd helped pay for when she and Ethan decided their old furniture wasn't classy enough. The air smelled like cinnamon from those fancy candles she loved, and the fireplace cast a warm glow across the room. I leaned back, sipping my coffee, and said, "Sophia, I was thinking I could bring Nonna's old lasagna recipe for Thanksgiving. You know, the one with the extra ricotta your mom used to rave about." My voice was light, hopeful, like I was offering a piece of our family's heart. Sophia was standing by the kitchen island, her manicured nails tapping against a glass of red wine. Ethan, her husband, was fiddling with his phone on the other side of the room, avoiding my eyes. The silence stretched just a beat too long, and I felt a knot tighten in my gut. Sophia cleared her throat, her lips curling into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Dad," she said, her voice soft but sharp, like a knife wrapped in silk. "I'm sorry, but you won't be welcome here for Thanksgiving." The words landed like a punch I didn't see coming. I blinked, certain I'd misheard her. "What? Do you mean not welcome?" My voice stayed calm, but my hands were already starting to tremble. Sophia glanced at Ethan, who still wouldn't look up from his phone. "It's just Ethan's parents, Richard and Margaret, are coming in from Boston. They have their own traditions, you know. They'd prefer if it was just their kind of gathering. Their kind of gathering." The phrase hung in the air, heavy, like damp laundry on a cold day. I looked around their living room, my eyes catching on every detail I'd paid for. The walnut hardwood floors installed when Sophia complained the old carpet was dated. The crystal chandelier she'd insisted on for ambiance, costing me $4,000 I didn't have to spare. The custom drapes, the ones she said made the house feel complete. All of it tied to the loan payments I'd been covering for 6 years. $3,200 every single month, wired straight from my account to theirs. My savings, my retirement, my wife Anna's life insurance money, all poured into this house, this life, for my daughter and her husband. "Sophia," I said slowly, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. "What kind of gathering is that exactly?" She shifted, her diamond bracelet catching the light. A bracelet I'd bought for her 30th birthday, back when I thought it would make her smile. "Dad, please don't make this harder than it needs to be. Richard and Margaret are particular. They like things a certain way, you know, refined, quiet." Ethan finally looked up, his face a mix of guilt and discomfort. "It's just easier this way, Frank," he mumbled. "We'll do something with you another time. Maybe the weekend after. Like Thanksgiving was just a meeting you could reschedule. Like I was an appointment to be penciled in when it suited them." I stood up, my knees creaking from years of crawling under sinks and climbing ladders to fix pipes. My life's work as a plumber had built this house for them. But I wasn't good enough to sit at their table. I walked toward the door, past the framed photos on the wall, pictures of Sophia and Ethan's wedding, their vacations, their perfect life. My face was nowhere to be found. "Sophia," I said, my hand on the cold brass doorknob, "tell Richard." And Margaret, I said, Buona festa. The Italian rolled off my tongue, a quiet nod to the heritage they'd never understood. The November air hit my face like a slap as I stepped outside. Behind me, I heard Sophia call my name once, soft, uncertain. Then the door clicked shut. Final. Absolute. I climbed into my truck, the engine rumbling to life as I sat there, staring at the glow of their house. The house I'd paid for, but where I'd never belong. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably Sophia, trying to smooth things over with empty apologies. I didn't answer. Instead, I drove into the Rochester dusk, the streetlights flickering, unlike stars I couldn't reach. And in that moment, something inside me shifted. I wasn't just Frank Russo, the guy who fixed pipes and paid other people's bills. I was done being invisible, done being used. As I drove away from Sophia's house that November evening, the streets of Rochester blurred past my truck's headlights. The cold seeped through the cracked window I hadn't fixed in years, couldn't afford to, not when every dollar went to keeping my daughter's world spinning. I kept replaying her words in my head. Not welcome. Refined. Their kind of gathering. Each one cut deeper than the last, like a rusty pipe wrench turning in my chest. I'd given everything for her. Everything. And now, I was just the guy who didn't fit in at their fancy Thanksgiving table. Let me take you back a bit, so you understand how we got here. 6 years ago, when Sophia and Ethan came to me with stars in their eyes talking about their dream home in Brighton, I didn't hesitate. My Anna had been gone 3 years by then, her laughter just a memory echoing in our old house. Sophia was all I had left, my little girl who used to beg me to carry her on my shoulders to watch the 4th of July fireworks. So when she said, they couldn't afford the down payment on that colonial-style house with the wraparound porch, I said yes. I always said yes. I took out a home equity loan on my place, the one Anna and I had paid off over 20 years of fixing pipes and pinching pennies. $40,000, wired straight to their bank for the down payment. Then came the monthly loan payments, $3,200 every single month for 6 years. I did the math once, late at night when I couldn't sleep. That's $400 gone. More than Anna and I had saved for our retirement. More than I'd ever spent on myself in a lifetime of work. It didn't stop there. When Sophia decided their kitchen needed a modern touch, I paid $15,000 for granite countertops and a stainless steel fridge that probably cost more than my truck. When Ethan lost his job during the pandemic, I covered their utilities for 6 months, another $6,000. And don't get me started on the little things. The $1,500 espresso machine Sophia just had to have for her morning ritual. The $2,000 pergola for their backyard because Ethan thought it would elevate their outdoor space. I ate canned soup and day-old bread so they could live like they were in some glossy magazine. I'm not saying I expected a parade in my honor, but a thank you, a shred of respect. That would have been nice. Instead, I got phone calls from Sophia, her voice sweet as cannoli cream when she needed something. Dad, the water bill's a little high this month. Dad, can you help with the property taxes? Just this once. It was never just once. And Ethan? He'd nod along, muttering about how they'd pay me back when things settled. Things never settled. Then there were Richard and Margaret, Ethan's parents. Oh, they had a way of looking at me, like I was some hired hand who'd wandered into their country club by mistake. At Sophia's wedding, Margaret pulled me aside to say my homemade tiramisu was a bit heavy for their guests' tastes. You know, Frank, our people prefer lighter desserts, more sophisticated. Richard wasn't much better. He'd ask about my plumbing business with a smirk, like fixing pipes was something you did when you couldn't make it in the real world. Once he told me my Sunday dinners, spaghetti with meatballs, the recipe Anna's mother brought from Sicily, were a bit too ethnic for their palate. Too ethnic. My family's food, my heritage, reduced to a sneer. I kept quiet for Sophia's sake, swallowed the insults, smiled at the right moments, paid the bills. I thought that's what fathers did. I thought that's what love looked like. But sitting in my truck that night, the heater rattling against the November chill, I saw it clearly. Love wasn't supposed to feel like this. Love wasn't supposed to leave you standing on the outside of your own daughter's life, clutching a recipe nobody wanted. I pulled over at a red light on East Avenue, watching families load groceries into their cars, kids laughing as they chased each other around the parking lot. That used to be Sophia and me. Back when she'd run to the door when I came home, her pigtails bouncing, shouting, "Papa's here!" Back before Ethan, before Richard and Margaret, before I became the guy who paid for their dreams while they rolled their eyes at my working-class ways. The number started spinning in my head. $230,000. 6 years of my life. Anna's life insurance money, gone. The college fund we'd started for grandkids I'd probably never see, drained. I thought about the loan. Officer at the bank, a kind woman named Linda, who'd looked at me with pity when I refinanced my house. "Frank, are you sure? This is a big risk for someone else's home." Someone else's home. Not my daughter's future. Not my family's. Happiness, someone else's home. I drove past Winton Road, where I'd taken out a second loan when Ethan's startup tanked. "Just temporary, Frank," he'd said, while Sophia stood behind him, her $800 handbag swinging from her arm. Temporary. That was 2 years ago. My house, the one Anna and I built our life in, was falling apart. Cracked driveway, leaky roof, because every spare dollar went to their perfect suburban fantasy. By the time I pulled into my driveway, my hands were steady, but my heart was pounding. The porch light flickered, another repair I'd put off. Inside, the house was quiet, too quiet without Anna's voice singing old Italian songs. My phone buzzed again. Sophia's name on the screen, probably wanting to explain why I wasn't good enough for their Thanksgiving. I let it ring. And then, I did something I should have done years ago. I picked up the phone, not to answer her, but to call my bank. "Customer service," a voice said after 2 rings. "This is Jennifer. How can I help you, Mr. Russo?" My voice came out steady, like it belonged to someone else. "I need to cancel an automatic payment, effective immediately." And just like that, 6 years of bleeding money stopped. The silence on the other end felt like freedom. For the first time in years, I wasn't just Sophia's father, the plumber who paid the bills. I was Frank Russo, and I was done being invisible. 3 days after I walked out of Sophia's house, my phone rang as I was scrubbing a pot in my kitchen sink. The November light filtered through the window, weak and gray, like it was tired of trying. I glanced at the screen. Sophia's name stared back at me, bold and unapologetic, just like her. I let it ring twice, 3 times, my hands still in the soapy water before I dried them on a dish towel and picked up. I didn't say anything at first, just waited. Let her feel the weight of the silence. "Dad?" Her voice came through sweet as ever, like she was calling to ask about my day. "I hope I'm not catching you at a bad time." I leaned against the counter, the same counter Anna used to roll out dough for her Sunday ravioli. Not a bad time, Sophia. What do you want? My tone was even, but there was an edge to it, one I didn't bother hiding. She didn't seem to notice. Look, I know things got a little tense the other day, she said, her words careful, like she was stepping around broken glass. But we need to move past that. Ethan's parents are flying in from Boston for Thanksgiving, and their flight lands at Rochester Airport tomorrow at 3 p.m. Could you pick them up? It'd really help us out. The audacity hit me like a cold wind. Less than a week after telling me I wasn't welcome at their precious Thanksgiving dinner, she was asking me to play chauffeur for the very people who thought I was beneath them. I let the silence stretch again, long enough that I could hear her shift uncomfortably on the other end. Sophia, I said finally, my voice low. Did you forget what you said to me about how I don't fit in with Richard and Margaret's refined gathering? She sighed, a sharp little sound, like I was being difficult. Dad, please. This isn't about that. It's about being practical. You're retired, you've got time, and we're swamped with prep for the dinner. It's what family does, you know. We help each other. Family. The word felt like a slap. I looked around my kitchen, at the chipped mugs Anna and I used to share, at the fridge that hadn't been replaced since the 90s because every spare dollar went to Sophia's life. Family, I repeated, letting the word hang there. Is that what we are, Sophia? Because last I checked, family doesn't tell you you're not good enough to sit at their table. She didn't miss a beat. Dad, you're blowing this out of proportion. Richard and Margaret are just particular. They're used to a certain kind of atmosphere. You know, intellectual conversations, fine wine, that sort of thing. It's not personal. It's just how they are. I could hear the rustle of shopping bags in the background, probably from some boutique on Park Avenue where she was spending money that should have gone to their loan payment. Money I wasn't covering anymore. Not personal, I said, my voice still calm but harder now, like the steel pipes I used to weld. You told me my lasagna, your grandmother's recipe, wouldn't fit their sophisticated tastes. You told me I'd make them uncomfortable because I'm not one of their educated friends. That sounds pretty personal to me. There was a pause, and when she spoke again, the sweetness was gone, replaced by something colder. Dad, let's be real. You're a plumber. You fix pipes. They're professors. They travel the world. They talk about literature and politics. What are you going to contribute to the conversation? Stories about unclogging drains? The words hit harder than I expected, like a hammer on a rusty nail. 9 years I'd bitten my tongue, smiled through their jabs, paid their bills to keep Sophia happy. I'd listened to Margaret complain about the garlicky smell of my cooking, watched Richard smirk when I mentioned my business. All for her. And now, this. My daughter. My flesh and blood, reducing me to a stereotype. A plumber who didn't belong. I tightened my grip on the phone, my knuckles white against the cracked countertop. You know, Sophia, I said, my voice dropping to something I barely recognized. Your mother would have been ashamed to hear you talk like that. Anna knew what family meant. She knew what respect looked like. There was a sharp intake of breath on her end, but I didn't stop. You and Ethan, you've taken everything from me. My savings, my retirement, my pride, and now you want me to play taxi driver for people who think I'm not good enough to eat with them? We're done pretending this is family. Dad, wait. She started, but I cut her off. No, Sophia. This conversation's over. I ended the call, set the phone down carefully, like it might break if I wasn't gentle. The kitchen felt different, quieter, like the air itself had shifted. For the first time in years, I wasn't angry. I was clear about who I was, what I'd given, and what I deserved. I walked to my desk, an old oak thing Anna picked out at a flea market decades ago, and pulled out a folder I'd been ignoring for too long. Bank statements, loan agreements, receipts, a paper trail of my love for my daughter and her betrayal. 6 years of payments, $230,400 in loan transfers alone, not counting the extras. The numbers stared back at me, cold and undeniable. I'd already canceled the automatic payments, but that was just the beginning. Sophia and her in-laws had pushed me too far, and I wasn't going to stay their doormat anymore. I started flipping through the papers, my mind already working on a plan. A plan to show them exactly who Frank Russo was. That night, after hanging up on Sophia, I didn't sleep. Not because I was angry, though I was, deep down, like a furnace glowing red, but banked for now. No, I didn't sleep, because something else had taken hold. Clarity. For the first time in years, I saw myself clearly. Not Frank Russo, the plumber who paid for his daughter's perfect life. Not Frank, the guy who smiled through insults to keep the peace. I was Frank Russo, a man who'd built a business from nothing, who'd raised a daughter through grief, who'd given everything and gotten nothing but disdain in return. And I was done. I sat at my kitchen table, the same one where Anna used to pour me coffee and tell me about her day. The folder of bank statements and receipts lay open in front of me, a map of my mistakes. 6 years of loan payments, $200 a month, wired straight to Sophia and Ethan's account. That's $234 just for the house. Add another $15,000 for their kitchen remodel, $10,000 for the roof repair when that big storm hit Rochester in 21, $5,000 here and there for emergencies like Sophia's new wardrobe or Ethan's golf club membership. I'd stopped keeping track after $260,000 because the numbers hurt too much, but now I was adding them up again, and each one fueled something new inside me. Not anger. Purpose. I pulled out my old laptop, the one I used to track invoices for my plumbing business before I retired. It hummed to life, slow and stubborn, like me these past few years. I started with Sophia's Instagram. Picture after picture of their dream home, the granite countertops I paid for, the backyard pergola I funded, the dining room table set for parties I was never invited to. One post from last month showed Sophia in a designer dress captioned, "Living our best life. So grateful for everything we've built." Built. The word made my jaw clench. She hadn't built a damn thing. I had. With every skipped meal, every unpaid bill, every dream I'd let go of to keep their world shiny. Then I found Margaret's page. Ethan's mother, always so polished, with her perfectly curated photos of charity luncheons and wine tastings at Finger Lakes. One post caught my eye. A picture of her and Richard at some gala, with a caption that read, "Surrounded by people who know their place in the world. Blessed." I scrolled through the comments, friends praising her elegance and class. Class. The same class that made her wrinkle her nose at my lasagna, that made her tell me my stories about fixing pipes for Rochester families, were quaint, but not fit for her dinner table. I took a screenshot, then another. Every post was evidence, a piece of their hypocrisy I'd use when the time came. Ethan's LinkedIn was next. His profile painted him as some hotshot entrepreneur, but I knew the truth. His startup had crashed and burned, leaving me to cover their bills for 2 years. But there, in his recent activity, was a connection that made my blood run cold. Emily Carter, lifestyle editor at the Rochester Chronicle. The same Emily Carter who'd written a piece 2 days ago, buried on page 4, about a retired tradesman who'd callously abandoned an elderly couple at the Rochester airport during a chilly November evening. That couple was Richard and Margaret, of course, and the tradesman was me. The article was short but vicious, painting me as some heartless old man who'd left them stranded out of spite. No mention of the $260,000 I'd poured into their lives. No mention of being banned from their Thanksgiving because I wasn't refined enough. Just lies, dressed up in newsprint. I leaned back in my chair, the kitchen clock ticking loud in the silence. Emily Carter. I didn't know her, but I knew how this worked. Richard had been a professor at the University of Rochester for decades, with connections that reached deep into the city's elite. A quick search through a local business directory confirmed it. 2 mutual contacts between Richard and Emily's editor at the Chronicle. The article wasn't a coincidence. It was a calculated hit, meant to shame me in a city where reputation is everything. They thought they could bury me with a few well-placed words. They were wrong. I started pulling together my evidence, like I was building a case for court. Bank statements, highlighted in yellow to show every $3,200 transfer. Receipts for the countertops, the roof, the pergola, even the $2,000 espresso machine Sophia swore she'd use every day, but probably hadn't touched since last spring. I printed screenshots from their social media, Sophia's posts about her perfect life, Margaret's snide comments about people knowing their place. I even found an old email from Sophia, begging me to cover their property taxes because Ethan's big deal hadn't come through. "You're the only one we can count on, Dad," she'd written. I'd believed her then, not anymore. By the time I finished, it was past midnight, and my kitchen table was covered in papers. 10 neat stacks, one for each guest at their precious Thanksgiving dinner. But there was something else, something I hadn't told anyone, not even Anna when she was alive. A secret I'd kept to protect Sophia, to redact that could hurt her more than anything. It was the kind of secret that could shatter Ethan's perfect image, and I'd held onto it for years out of love for my daughter. But love has limits, and I'd reached mine. That secret was my ace in the hole, and I was going to play it at the right moment. I looked at the calendar on my wall. November 27th, Thanksgiving, was circled in red. Not because it was a holiday, but because it was the day I'd show up at their door with more than just evidence. I'd bring the truth, the whole truth, and watch their carefully built world crumble. I stacked the papers carefully, my hands steady for the first time in days. This wasn't just about money anymore. It was about respect, about family, about showing them who Frank Russo really was. Thanksgiving morning dawned cold and gray in Rochester, the kind of day that makes you crave a warm house and a table full of family. I used to dream of days like this with Sophia, laughing over Anna's. Lasagna, passing plates of turkey and stories around the table. But those dreams were long gone, replaced by the weight of the briefcase in my hand as I dressed in my best suit, the navy one I'd worn to Anna's funeral 9 years ago. Today wasn't about mourning, though. Today was about truth. Today, I'd show Sophia, Ethan, and their high society in-laws exactly who they'd been stepping on all these years. I drove to their house in Brighton, the streets quiet, except for the occasional kid chasing a football in the front yard. Their colonial-style home glowed with warm light, cars lined up in the driveway like a parade of privilege. Through the big bay window, I could see figures moving in the dining room, Sophia playing the perfect hostess in the house my money had built. My watch read 6:45 p.m. Perfect timing. Late enough that the guests would be seated, forks in hand, early enough that they couldn't slip away without facing what I had to say. I adjusted my tie, grabbed my briefcase, and walked to the front door. It was unlocked, of course. Sophia loved to brag about how safe their neighborhood was, how they didn't need to worry like some people in rougher parts of town. I stepped inside, the air thick with the smell of roasted turkey and expensive wine. Laughter spilled from the dining room, followed by Margaret's voice, sharp and polished. "Oh, darling, that's not how we do things in our family." Our family. The word stung, after everything they'd done to keep me out of it. I walked through the foyer, past the framed photos of Sophia and Ethan's trips to places I'd paid for. Cape Cod, Napa Valley, that ski lodge in Vermont. My footsteps were quiet, deliberate, on the walnut floors I'd funded. When I stepped into the dining room, 10 faces turned toward me, frozen mid-bite, mid-laugh. Sophia's wine glass stopped halfway to her lips, her eyes wide with shock. Ethan's face drained of color, like he'd seen a ghost. Richard and Margaret sat at the head of the table, their expressions shifting from confusion to outrage. The other guests, neighbors, friends, some of Margaret's charity luncheon crowd, stared, forks hovering over their plates. "Good evening, everyone," I said, my voice calm, steady, like I was just another guest arriving late. "I hope you don't mind me joining your Thanksgiving celebration." Sophia recovered first, her voice sharp as a knife. "Dad, this is completely inappropriate. You need to leave. Now." I set my briefcase on the marble sideboard, another purchase I'd covered when Sophia decided their old one wasn't elegant enough, and clicked it open. "Actually," I said, pulling out the first stack of papers, "I think your guests deserve to know who's really been paying for this dinner, this house, this entire lifestyle you've been showing off." A woman in a cashmere sweater, probably one of Margaret's friends, leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What's he talking about, Sophia?" Sophia's smile faltered, but she waved a hand dismissively. "He's just upset. It's a family matter." "Ethan, do something." Ethan started to stand, but I was already moving, placing a neatly bound packet of documents in front of each guest. "These are bank records," I said, my voice conversational, like I was explaining a plumbing job. 6 years of loan payments, $3,200 a month. That's $230,400 just for the house. Add another $15,000 for the kitchen remodel, $10,000 for the roof, $5,000 for the pergola out back. $260,000 total, give or take. All from my savings, my retirement, my wife's life insurance. The room went quiet, except for the soft rustle of papers as the guests flipped through the evidence. Bank statements, highlighted in yellow. Receipts for granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, Sophia's diamond bracelet. Screenshots of her Instagram posts, boasting about our dream home, with no mention of me. One man, gray-haired and wearing a Rolex, stared at a bank transfer. "This is staggering," he muttered. A woman across from him shook her head. "Sophia, why didn't you tell us any of this?" Sophia's composure cracked, her voice rising. "It's not what it looks like. Dad offered to help. We never asked for it." I pulled out the Rochester Chronicle article, the one that called me a heartless tradesman who'd abandoned Richard and Margaret at the airport. "Let's talk about what you did ask for," I said, placing copies on the table, "and what you told the media about me." The guests recognized my photo, the unflattering shot from my old business website. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Richard used his university connections to plant this story," I continued, tapping the article. "Called in a favor with Emily Carter, the lifestyle editor. Painted me as some cruel old man who left his in-laws stranded in chilly weather. Except it was 50 degrees and sunny that day. And they weren't stranded tourists. They were coming to this very dinner, the one I was banned from because I'm not refined enough for their company. Margaret found her voice, her tone icy. This is outrageous. We never said... I cut her off, pulling out my phone. You never said what, Margaret? That my Italian cooking was too heavy for your guests? That my stories about fixing pipes for Rochester families wouldn't fit your intellectual conversations? I scrolled to a screenshot of her Instagram post, the one about people knowing their place. I held it up for everyone to see. Or maybe you meant this. The woman in the cashmere sweater shifted uncomfortably. Margaret, surely you didn't... Richard blustered, his face red. This man is delusional. He's twisting everything. But the guests were reading now, their eyes darting between the bank statements and the article. The social dynamic was shifting, like a tide turning against them. And then, I played my ace. The secret I'd kept for years, the one Anna had begged me to hold close to protect Sophia. There's one more thing you should know, I said. My voice low but clear, carrying to every corner of the room. Ethan, you've been playing the perfect husband, haven't you? The entrepreneur, the devoted son-in-law. But Anna found out something about you, right after your wedding. She saw you with another woman at that hotel bar on Monroe Avenue. She heard you on the phone, promising to leave Sophia when your startup took off. Anna kept it quiet to spare Sophia's heart. I kept it quiet for the same reason. But I'm done protecting you. The room went dead silent. Sophia's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor. Ethan's mouth opened. But no. Words came out. The guests stared, some in shock, others in disgust. The woman with the Rolex turned to Sophia. Is this true? Sophia's eyes filled with tears, but she couldn't speak. Ethan stammered. It's not what you think. But his voice lacked conviction. I closed my briefcase, the click loud in the silence. Enjoy your dinner, I said, looking around the table. It's the last one I'll be paying for. As I turned to leave, I heard the first murmurs behind me. Guests demanding answers, voices rising in accusation. Richard tried to speak, but someone cut him off. How could you let this man pay for everything and treat him like this? The woman in the cashmere sweater sounded furious. This is unconscionable. I walked out into the November night, the cold air sharp against my face. Behind me, the house buzzed with chaos, the perfect facade of Sophia and Ethan's life cracking like the wine glass on their floor. For the first time in years, I felt light, free. I'd come to their table, not as a plumber, not as a checkbook, but as Frank Russo, a man who'd finally stood up for himself. And it felt damn good. The days after that Thanksgiving dinner felt like the calm after a storm. Rochester's winter settled in, the kind of cold that creeps into your bones, but my house felt warmer than it had in years. Not because of the old radiator clanking in the corner, but because I'd finally stopped carrying the weight of Sophia and Ethan's world on my shoulders. I'd poured myself a glass of Chianti that night, the good stuff I'd been saving for a moment worth celebrating. I raised it to Anna's photo on the mantel, her smile frozen in time, and whispered, "We did it, love. We're free." Free. The first time since she'd been gone, I meant it. The fallout came fast. By Monday, my phone was buzzing like a hornet's nest. Sophia's number, Ethan's, even Margaret's, though I'd blocked them all after the first voicemails. Sophia's was the worst, hysterical, tearful, begging me to fix this. I didn't listen past the first 10 seconds. I didn't Need to. The Rochester Chronicle ran a follow-up piece, not by Emily Carter this time, but by a new reporter who'd caught wind of the real story. Local couple's lavish lifestyle funded by unsung father, the headline read. It didn't name me directly, but Rochester's a small enough city that word spread like wildfire. Friends of Richard and Margaret stopped inviting them to their galas. Their charity luncheon crowd whispered behind their backs. Sophia's Instagram went silent, her last post a half-hearted apology that got torn apart in the comments. Ungrateful, one user wrote. You don't deserve him, said another. Then came the letter, delivered by certified mail on a snowy morning in January. I signed for it at my front door, the wind biting at my knuckles. Notice of default, it read in bold letters. 3 months of missed loan payments, $9,600 in arrears. Sophia and Ethan had 14 days to bring the account current or face foreclosure on the house I'd helped them buy. I set the letter on my kitchen counter, next to my coffee mug, and read it the way you'd read about a storm hitting some far-off town. Interesting, but not my problem anymore. I'd spent 6 years bailing them out. Let them figure it out now. My phone kept ringing through February. Sophia's voicemails grew more desperate, Ethan's more resigned. I didn't answer. I was too busy fixing up my own life. With the loan payments gone, I had money to spare for the first time in years. I replaced the leaky roof on my house, the one I'd ignored while paying for theirs. I bought a new recliner, soft and comfortable, the kind Anna would have loved. I even started going to the Italian-American Community Center down on Lyle Avenue, where I played cards with guys my age who didn't care that I was just a plumber. They laughed at my stories, shared their own, and invited me to their family dinners. Real family, the kind that doesn't come with a price tag. It was early March when Sophia showed up at my door. I was in the middle of making meatballs, the kitchen smelling like garlic and basil, when I heard the knock. Soft at first, then insistent. I wiped my hands on my apron and opened the door to find her standing there, her coat too thin for the Rochester wind, her eyes red and puffy. She looked older than her 30 years, like the weight of her choices had finally caught up. "Dad," she said, her voice breaking, "can we talk?" I stepped aside, letting her in. She glanced around, her eyes lingering on the new paint, on the walls, the new rug in the living room. "Nice place," she said quietly, like she was seeing it for the first time. "It's what happens when you stop paying for someone else's life," I replied, not unkindly, and gestured to the couch. "Coffee?" She shook her head, sitting on the edge like she didn't deserve to get comfortable. "Dad, I'm so sorry," she started, her voice trembling. "For Thanksgiving, for the article, for everything. I didn't realize how much we'd hurt you." I leaned against the counter, arms crossed, and let her talk. She told me about the foreclosure notice, how Ethan was scrambling to find a second job, how Richard and Margaret had stopped speaking to them after their social circle turned. "I got caught up in it," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "Their world, their expectations. I thought I had to be like them to be enough. I was wrong. I see that now." Her hands twisted in her lap, the diamond bracelet I'd bought her gone, probably sold to cover a bill. I nodded, letting the silence sit between us. "What did they say about your mother?" I asked finally, my voice steady but sharp. Sophia's face crumpled. "Margaret said, she said Mom knew how to stay in her lane, that she didn't try to be something she wasn't, like you did." My jaw tightened at the mention of Anna, but I kept my cool. "And you let them say that about her? About us?" I should have stopped them, she whispered. I should have stood up for you years ago, for Mom. I was weak, Dad. I'm so... Sorry. The kitchen clock ticked, loud in the quiet. Outside, a neighbor's snowblower hummed, a reminder of the normal world going on without us. The house is gone, isn't it? She said, her voice barely audible. We can't make the payments without you. You'll figure it out, I said, not harshly but firm. The same way I figured out how to live without a daughter who respected me. The same way I learned to spend Thanksgiving alone while you sat with people who thought I was beneath them. Her shoulders shook, but I didn't move to comfort her. Not yet. You took $260,000 from me, Sophia. 6 years of my life. But, worse, you took my trust, my pride, and you let them spit on your mother's memory. She cried then, quiet sobs that filled the space between us. I've lost you, haven't I? She said finally. I chose them over you, and now you're gone. I looked at her, my little girl who used to dance around the kitchen with Anna, and felt a pang in my chest. You didn't lose me, Sophia, I said softly. You pushed me away. There's a difference. She nodded, wiping her eyes. Is there any chance we can start over? I thought about it, really thought about it. Maybe, I said. But it's not about money. It's about respect. You want to be my daughter again, you earn it. You show me you know what family means. She stood, her hands shaking, and walked to the door. I'll try, Dad, she said, and I believed she meant it. But trying wasn't enough. Not yet. After she left, I finished my meatballs, the kitchen warm with the smell of home. For the first time in years, I wasn't cooking for anyone else, just me. And it tasted better than I'd expected. Spring came late to Rochester that year, but by April the trees on my street were budding, and the air carried the promise of something new. I stood on my back porch, a glass of Chianti in my hand, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of pink and gold. Anna used to love evenings like this. She'd sit out here with me, her head on my shoulder, talking about the future. Our future, Sophia's future. I spent so many years after she was gone trying to hold on to that future, pouring everything I had into Sophia's life, thinking it would keep us close. I was wrong. But standing there, with the world waking up around me, I realized something else. I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was living. The foreclosure notice had come and gone. Sophia and Ethan lost the house in Brighton, sold it at a loss to cover the missed payments. I heard through a cousin that they'd moved into a smaller place, a rental on the edge of town. Ethan was working 2 jobs now, and Sophia had taken a part-time gig at a boutique, probably the same one where she used to shop with my money. I didn't feel joy at their struggle, but I didn't feel guilt either. They'd made their choices, just like I'd made mine. For the first time in years, my choices were for me. I'd been busy too. With the loan payments gone, I fixed up the house, new windows that didn't leak, a fresh coat of paint in the living room, a garden out back where I planted basil and tomatoes, just like Anna used to. I started going to the Italian-American Community Center every week, where I'd play bocce with guys who'd known me since I was a kid hauling pipe wrenches for my dad's business. They didn't care that I was just a plumber. They cared about my stories, my laugh, the way I made Anna's old marinara sauce for their potlucks. One of them, Sal, even set me up with a widow named Carla, who liked my cooking and didn't mind that I wasn't a professor or a country club member. We'd been out a few times, and her smile reminded me of what it felt like to be seen. My phone buzzed as I stood on the porch, A text from my cousin Maria. Dinner Sunday? The kids want to show you their science fair projects. I smiled and typed back, count me in. Real family, I'd learned, wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about the people who wanted you there, who valued you for who you were, not what you could give them. Maria and her kids, the guys at the community center, even Carla, they were my family now. And that felt like enough. I thought about Sophia sometimes, about the little girl who used to cling to my hand at the Rochester Public Market, begging for a cannoli. I wondered if she'd find her way back to that girl, the one who loved her parents for who they were, not what they could. Bye. She'd called a few times since that day in March, leaving voicemails about wanting to make things right. I listened to them, but I didn't call back. Not yet. Forgiveness wasn't the same as trust, and trust was something she'd have to earn. I'd given her my heart for 30 years. Now, it was her turn to show me she deserved it. Looking back, I don't regret what I did that Thanksgiving. Walking into their dining room, laying out the truth, exposing Ethan's betrayal. It wasn't just about settling a score. It was about standing up for myself, for Anna, for the life we'd built together. I'd spent 6 years being their bank, their doormat, their unsophisticated father-in-law, and I'd let it happen because I thought that's what love looked like. But love doesn't mean erasing yourself. Love doesn't mean letting people walk over you because they're family. Love means knowing your worth and demanding respect, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. I learned something else, too. You can't control how others treat you, but you can control how you respond. I could have kept paying their bills, kept swallowing their insults, kept hoping they'd see me one day. But hope isn't a plan. Standing up, drawing a line, saying, enough. That's a plan. And when I did, when I walked into that dining room and told the truth, I took back something they'd taken from me, my dignity, my pride, my right to be Frank Russo, not just Sophia's father or Richard and Margaret's punching bag. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I raised my glass to Anna's photo, still sitting on the mantel inside. Here's to us, love, I said softly, and to never letting anyone make us small again. The Chianti tasted like freedom, like the promise of a life I was finally building for myself. At 64, I was starting over, and the future looked brighter than I'd ever dared to dream. If this story hit home for you, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Drop a comment below. Tell me about a time you had to stand up for yourself or draw a line with family. Your stories keep this community going, and I read every single one. Want to hear more? Click the box on the left for the next story. And until then, remember this. Family isn't about what you give. It's about who's there when you need them most. Thanks for listening.